Oh, absolutely. I mean, for me, because I do feel a big key to this game is whether Indiana can get pressure on Rayola, because he's
Yeah.
a young guy. He is a very, inexperienced player, but he's very talented, and he's only going to get better, I believe, because
Yep.
he already, to me, has been getting better since the beginning of the season. He's been playing better, even though he still has, mistakes, and sometimes he could do better at, reading the
Yeah.
defense. But
Naturally.
do you think that Rayola will be able to handle, a semi, I wouldn't say like super tough road environment, but a semi tough road environment against Indiana, and against Indiana's defense that is better than it's been? Like, do you believe that he will be able to handle the pressure?
Yeah, and it's tough to say, how, because our road opponents, Purdue wasn't very good, so we haven't seen that, but I do get, big game situations. One of the things I said going to the Colorado game is I thought that was a great experience for him to be able to play in a big moment that has a lot of meaning to the university and the fans, and it's a pivotal game against a team that Nebraska should be. And I thought that was good for him to get that experience and get that confidence and not go against like an Ohio State and get blown out. So we've seen him operate under the pressure. But then my big concern coming into the season was how, what happens against the physical teams. I thought Illinois and Rutgers, mainly Rutgers initially, and then Illinois started playing really well. But I knew Illinois is a physical team, but I thought Rutgers was going to be, the better team. But just their physicality concerned me in terms of how they match up. Styles make fights, kind of like we were talking about before. And I think those two physical games, especially against against Rutgers, because Rutgers actually did put a lot of heat on them, and our offense wasn't moving the ball very well. But that I did a video on that. That had a lot to do with play sequencing, in my opinion. But there were mistakes, right? And it seemed like, he threw the interception, and it seemed like he tightened up a little bit after that. The interception he was kind of baited. It was his first like real freshman mistake. He was kind of baited in the throw. The linebacker stepped up. He was trying to throw the RPO quick slant, and the linebacker backed up and just kind of lurked him, and so I think he's built for the pressure. I really think this is one of those situations where I want Nebraska to definitely try to be playing with a lead and not trying to play catch up. That way, Nebraska can run their offense and be able to run the ball and set him up. Because last week, when we were in a bunch of third and longs, and the reason we were in third and longs is when, Satterfield is passing laterally. When he's passing to the outsides, or jet sweeps, like we didn't get a ton of yards on those. Those weren't working. The drives that we scored on against Rutgers, we balanced it out, ran the ball, passed the ball, and we stayed ahead of the line of scrimmage. Every time we throw it laterally behind the line of scrimmage, it ends up killing our drives. And so I think a lot of it's going to come down to really the play sequencing and getting him into a rhythm. I think once he's in a rhythm, it's just ball, but when you have to think, when you're going to be a half second late. And we saw that because Rayola missed a couple, he had a wheel route that was open, but it's some of those timing routes, right? You have a split second window to hit that route before it closes up. And that led to a couple sacks. So, but the good thing about that is I talked about this after the Illinois game, that the defensive film on Illinois, I wasn't really worried about our defense after that game, because I was like, the real testament of our defense will be how they respond once they go in and watch the film. If we trust the coaches, we should trust them to respond. And I'm keeping that same approach about the offense. It's going to come down to how they respond, and how Dylan responds is going to tell us a lot. Coming off of that game where we only scored 14 points, a lot of question marks around the offense. Does he come out and just kind of sling it around the field and kind of reestablish himself? Because he doesn't seem like a guy who's really rattled by much, or a moment's too big for him. But this is a huge game for both teams, so it'll be interesting, that dynamic, to see how it plays out. But like the biggest thing for me was seeing how when he gets roughed up, when he gets hit, and some big bodies land on him, those Big Ten guys start really hitting him, how once his body got some wear and tear, how is that going to go? And yeah, last week I think it was a combination of execution issues, and those can't happen against Indiana. The offense needs to be. So that's why I think the bye week was important for us to be able to kind of fine tune some of those execution things and keep everything ahead of the sticks, kind of cut down on some of these dumb penalties that were a couple of drive killers last time, and really, implement our game plan and do what we do well and stop trying to, I guess, deviate from that, get a little too creative or a little too complex. And then also, I just think we need to target the middle of the field, the intermediate level of the field a little more. We're throwing a lot of deep routes. But if we utilize the middle of the field more, especially even on 3rd and longs, 3rd and 10, we don't always have to throw 15, 20 yards. Even if we check it down underneath and try to let our athletes make some plays, like, you got to just keep it moving. And I think it's been a little too much of all or nothing so far. And I just think there needs to be consistency from our offense to keep him in a rhythm for sure. So,
but Indiana football is like in the top 10 to 15 in college football. I don't know the exact number, but I know they're in the top 10 to 15 in college football on the amount of 3rd downs they've had. They barely had any. So that's a big thing I think Nebraska has to do to Indiana is put them in 3rd down. Can Indiana convert when there's pressure? Because, they've barely ever had 3rd downs. I mean, like, they've just been rolling on offense.
Yeah.
Like, they're just getting 1st and 10s. They're just getting chunk plays. So, absolutely.
Do you think that potentially becomes an issue if Indiana needs to kind of slow the game down and kind of, work those 3rd downs a little bit, try to get to, 3rd and 1s and try to just, in terms of kind of milking the clock? Do you think they have the ability to dial it back and do that and control the clock if they're in a situation where maybe it's the 4th quarter tight game and they're just trying to get out of there, Do you think that's something they're able to do, is control the clock in that time of possession like that?
It's a great question because, I mean, we've seen some teams really struggle with clock management this year, including Alabama. I mean, they've been terrible with clock management, absolutely horrible. Like, they're still playing up tempo with the lead late in the game. That makes no sense. You don't do that. The thing with Indiana, though, is even though their offense has been great so far this season, they actually rank toward the bottom in college football in tempo. They're already running a pretty slow offense, so they use the majority of the clock every single time.
Yeah.
They just have success when they run their offense. It isn't super quick, though. So I think they can. I think the key just for Indiana is the fact if they have the lead and you want to milk the clock, can they run the ball against Nebraska's defense? Because Indiana's been running the ball very well, but they haven't really played anybody with a good run defense until, I guess, Northwestern. But Indiana did run the ball very well on Northwestern. So I'm not super concerned, but I am more concerned against Nebraska than anybody else that they've played. But I would say, yes, I think Indiana can do that. I just think that the way that they've been having success on offense, they haven't had to have 3rd downs because they're just – Rourke's been throwing 15-yard passes downfield. Yeah. I mean, 1st and 10, 1st down. 1st and 10, first down.
Yeah, it doesn't mean necessarily they're not capable of it.
They could convert 3rd downs if they had to, if they're just running the ball. I think they could.
You think Nebraska matches up better with Indiana than they did with Illinois?
That's a good question.
I think yes, because the physicality of Illinois is what ruled the day and wore us down. And that was my concern to begin with, because there was one drive where they hit 5 3rd downs, 5 3rd downs, and they scored a touchdown, but they were just methodical. They had the H-back, and they were using the H-back in a myriad of different ways, and then they snuck them out for a couple passes. They kind of worked everything in systematically, and they were just getting a 3rd and short and converting. But then Nebraska comes down and scores in 3 plays. And I'm not going to be upset about a touchdown, but your defense is right back on the field. And Illinois was able to wear on us. Not only that, their game plan got our defense on their heels, but Illinois was able to wear on Nebraska a bit. And wear on the run defense, because the defense, early on was stopping the run pretty well. Overall, if you look at the yards per carry, but the run game was getting some 8-10 yard carries in the second half. That's where I think, because since Nebraska is a very physical team, that's where I think Illinois was the bad matchup, or the tougher matchup, just because it's physicality on physicality, who's going to win, and who's going to implement their game plan. With Indiana, I just think it's 2 different styles contrasting. And there's no way for me, like, it's so hard to really pinpoint how these teams match up, because they're both in like their first good season in a while. And so it's 2 completely different teams. And to be fair, our schedule hasn't been a world beater of a schedule either. So two teams that, you know, have played a couple of difficult matchups. And we just don't know necessarily how they match up with each other, just because it's such a new couple of styles of these two teams. And that's the most interesting part. But I think the physical matchups are what I was scared of, especially with the true freshman QB, especially with the lack of depth at our O-line and our secondary. So, yeah, but that's the one thing, kind of to your point, Indiana, it's not that they can't do these things. It's just that they haven't had to yet. And that'll be the big thing as to where Indiana matches up with us is if they can do some of the things that, you know, are going to play into our weaknesses and maybe bring a little bit of that physicality to us and maybe punch us in the mouth a little bit and see how we respond from there. I just feel like it's going to be, you know, explosiveness, and Nebraska's offense is explosive at times, but I think it's going to be, you know, methodical drives versus, you know, Indiana just kind of trying to get their chunk plays. But Curtis Rourke sets that up, because I was watching some film from Indiana, and it's all set up because he targets that middle of the field, you know, very well, especially like the intermediate level. And then the linebackers it'll bring the linebackers down, and then he just throws it over the top of them in that zone coverage. So Nebraska's going to have to get very creative with their coverages too. And but I do think, you know, Illinois' game plan on film, I think that helped Nebraska's defense a ton, because they have tightened up. But this is the best offense we've faced this year. So, yeah, I definitely think off rip, I would say Illinois, but we should know a lot more this Saturday. Can Indiana score a rushing TD against us? I don't know. That's tough, because Kyle Monungai got 4 shots from the 1 yard line. They ran 6 plays from the 1 yard line and couldn't get in. Rutgers.
I will say the difference, though, and not to discredit Rutgers, but like you said, Rutgers doesn't have a good passing offense, though. And see, when you have a great running back and you know you have to stop that guy, it puts all of the eyes on defense like, hey, we just got to shut him down. With Indiana, it's like you got to worry about the passing attack so much that it might be a little bit easier for Indiana to run on Nebraska than it was for Rutgers, because Nebraska knew that that's what Rutgers was going to do.
Specifically, I'm just talking about that goal line stand.
Absolutely.
Because what my game plan, what I said Nebraska needed to do going the Rutgers game was have a multiple touchdown lead by half and carry that into the second half and kind of try to keep it within a double-digit score, because then you force Ethan Kaliakmanis to try to beat you with his arm. And everything Kirk Shiroka likes to do on Rutgers plays off of Kyle Monungai. You know, he scripts everything off of that outside zone, inside zone, RPOs, run action passes. Like, they took that away, and Ethan Kaliakmanis had to turn into a pocket passer, and that just wasn't there. Now we're facing a pocket passer. Yeah. So the style transition there too is going to be very interesting. Now here's a question. How can Indiana O-line handle Nebraska front seven? Because in years past, that was one of Indiana's biggest issues, is their O-line play.
I agree. I mean, definitely Indiana's O-line. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. Like, I've tried to defend Tom Allen. I mean, even toward the end, I'm like, you know, he's a good coach overall with the energy and being able to give a team hope. And he had the success with the good coordinators, especially Kalen DeBoer. I mean, now he's the Alabama head coach, even though he's getting scrutiny now, but still, he's a good coach. But then all that folded, and then lost the coordinators, and then you had a terrible offensive line coach. You had terrible offensive line play, and he gave Indiana no chance. I mean, Penix would have never transferred to Washington, but he was getting his body destroyed. I mean, he would not be in the NFL right now, or, you know, been a Heisman candidate and all that kind of stuff, had all the success he had if he didn't get out of Indiana, because his body would have been completely.
Or get out of the Big Ten.
I mean, honestly, I'm just glad that he ended up being able to recover and have success, because we're seeing other quarterbacks like Cam Rising can't stay healthy, and his career is just going in the floor. So I'm glad Penix got out of Indiana when he did. And I'm saying that as an Indiana fan. He needed to leave. Because he was not going to survive. Indiana doesn't have that problem anymore. The O-line has a couple guys that should be draft picks. Like, I keep referencing this. Indiana has probably 5 or 6 guys that if they're not drafted, I don't know what people are doing. I really don't. Like, they should be drafted, but they're not getting any recognition. I mean, Curtis Rourke right now is, and bad teams that they've played. But Curtis Rourke right now is 10th in the Heisman voting, and he's not even on the draft boards at all. Not even in the 7th round. He's nowhere. He's not even in the 7th round on any draft board, and he's 10th in the Heisman voting. Now, obviously,
as long as he keeps winning, he'll definitely be.
I mean, I know he will, but like if he was anywhere else right now, he would be off the board.
Yeah, if he was at a big school, he would. Yeah, even if he was at like Colorado.
Rourke in Indiana, because if he plays well against Nebraska and Indiana's offensive line plays well against Nebraska, and then these guys are going to start showing up, because that's a huge win. But I do think Indiana's O-line significantly better. I think that they're going to get to Rourke a couple times. It's not like they're going to be able to keep him upright all game. But I do believe that Indiana's O-line is so much better, to the point where I do believe that they'll be able to hold up for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. And to kind of piggyback off that a little bit, just kind of with Indiana and their offense, just in your opinion, because I've kind of broke down what I saw from Indiana's offense just in watching a couple games of film. But how would you break down, the system or the systematic approach of Indiana's offense? Like, how do they create offense? For instance, like I said, with Illinois, it's just they stick to their game plan. They stick to what they do, and they build off of a formation, and they have plays that they use in situations off of that formation. And that's kind of how and then they slowly wear on you, and they try to get that run game going. What would you say is Indiana's approach and how they kind of open these guys up?
It's a great question. I mean, the thing is like I said, it's an interesting offense because of the fact that they don't do a lot of trick plays. They've done a little bit more than Tom Allen toward the end, where it was just basically running up the middle, and then on 3rd down, you had to throw it, which I'm like, what are you doing? You're going to run the ball on 1st and 2nd down every time. They're going to stop it, and then you throw on 3rd down. So I will say it's not like a very complicated offense. It's not, a lot of trick plays, different schemes, and all that kind of stuff. And it's not up-tempo. Like, a lot of people assume this offense is up-tempo because they're scoring a lot of points. It's not. It's really, I wouldn't say methodical, but it's just like they take most of the time on the shot clock, or the game clock, rather.
They're efficient.
They're just efficient, like you said. I mean, they just run their offense. And the other thing with Tom Allen, too, is the fact that during his tenure, they would have, like, the first drive, they would script it, and it was perfect, and they would score like almost every time. Like, if you remember against Michigan, remember Indiana was tied like 10-10 at the half, and then Michigan ended up beating them by like 30 a couple years ago. It's because, like, Indiana started out the game, they had all their plays written down, and then once they ran through that, they had nothing, and they had no other play calls. They ran through all of them. So, he did do a respectable job. That's why I keep talking about him, because he did a lot of great things for Indiana. And honestly, even though Indiana was 3-9 last year, Signetti would not have been able to come in and have this success off the bat if Tom Allen was a really bad coach. He was not. The foundation was there. He just couldn't keep it going. So, definitely, like, Indiana's offense, very methodical. It's a mix of run and pass. I would say they pass a little bit more, but it is about 50-50. They do run the ball a decent amount, and it's not always on 1st down. I mean, they'll have like an 8-yard completion on 1st down, and then they'll run on 2nd down, or they'll sometimes run on 1st down. It's just mixing it up.
And they
like
don't
you
run
said, a lot of intermediate
action.
passes, not a lot of deep throws, not even a lot of short stuff. Like, I would argue, like, throw some more like screen passes and use the blockers. No, it's a lot of just intermediate stuff. So if Nebraska could shut down the intermediate game, then I'm like, will Indiana be able to throw downfield or the short game to counter that? Because literally, it's like 15 yards, just over that first line of defense. That's why Rourke should be on draft boards, because he's making passes that like 90% of quarterbacks can't make.
Oh, he's making some unbelievable throws.
Absolutely.
And it's consistency. Like, you just got to admire consistency week in and week out. I don't care who you play. People struggle against bad teams. It's the consistency is something that needs to be talked about more, for sure. Let's go ahead and I guess we'll go ahead and, do you have a prediction in mind first off?
I do have a prediction. I had to go back and forth. I will say that I've been going back and forth on these two teams because I think it's a coin flip. I do not agree with the 6.5 point spread. I mean, it's cool seeing Indiana favored by that much, but I think it's 50-50. So I got a score prediction, but it took me a while to finally make my prediction.
What is it?
Well, I would say that looking at both teams, it's even. And I think that the strengths and weaknesses of both teams are even though they're different weaknesses and strengths, they average out to both teams being around the same. Even though Nebraska has the one loss, and they're not ranked, and Indiana's ranked 16th, that doesn't mean Indiana's better. As Mark Rogers himself has said all the time, there's not much difference between teams ranked anywhere from like 15 to like 35 or 40. It's just all how the records and the schedules balance themselves out. So definitely, both these teams are about even. I would argue actually that Nebraska as a team is a little bit better than Indiana. They probably have, more guys that are going to be in the NFL. Yeah, I've been hyping up IU's guys that should be in the NFL for this season, but Nebraska's got more studs. The only difference is that Indiana has the experienced players in the portal, the Mikel Camaras, the Curtis Rourkes. These guys have been around forever, 5, 6, 7 years in college football. Indiana, out of the 32 seventh-year players in college football this year, Indiana has 4 of them. Indiana has 4 of those 32 seventh-year players. Nebraska, they got some guys that have experience too, but then they got the freshmen. They got Rayola. He's young, going on the road. I'm worried about Indiana in this game because it's the big noon game. They're undefeated. Everybody is hyping them up, hyping up the Hoosiers. It could be what the game that finally cracks them, but I'm going to go with Indiana to beat Nebraska 28-24. I made that prediction before you said Nebraska couldn't kick a field goal. So
I have the same exact prediction, just the other way.
Okay.
I almost did 28-27, but 28-24. I have the same thing, just the other way. Yeah, no field goals. and
I feel bad that I gave Nebraska a field goal now. I shouldn't have done it. I didn't know.
Hey, listen, it's all good. We'll take it. We'll take it. Well, I mean, we at least made one versus Purdue, so there's a shot.